We have Heine, and we have Bob Biscaglia.
Who's Bob?
I don't know. Tom Biscaglia. It's a three-letter word name, so it's Tom, Bob, Dan, Ted.
You can call me Don Biscaglia.
Don. Yeah. And we're talking about horror stories in the gaming industry.
So yeah, we're gonna share those deals that went completely and utterly sideways, and the nightmare clients, and all of the shit that goes wrong. So hopefully, folks that are watching and listening don't have to do the whole, do the same thing as well. Who wants to start? Because I know I've got a couple. I know Tom's got a couple, and I know Tom and I share at least one.
How far back you want to go?
The one that you were talking about the last time we had you on the show, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, start with that one.
Yeah, Tom, what you want to start with that one? Do you remember the one that I'm referring to?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I can't remember what I did 2 weeks ago.
So I don't know what I did yesterday, much less 2 weeks ago. So one of my very first big deals that I was doing was a developer in Tom's neck of the woods down in Florida. Tom was their attorney, so that's how I met, Tom the first time.
God, they were like my third client. I think my third or fourth developer client.
Oh, so we were both fairly new at this then. Yes,
we're in the late '90s, right?
We're in
not even late.
Yeah, it had to have been after '98 because that's when I graduated college.
Yeah.
So anyway, we beautiful game. I mean, gorgeous game, and all kinds of little stuff in it that you see now, but back then it was like ridiculous. If you shot a soft drink machine, a Coke machine, drinks came out and rolled around, and you could kick them. It had like physics in it. You could shoot a basketball into the basketball goal. It was a multiplayer shooter, and I emphasize the word.
Oh, what about the rat?
What about the rat? I don't remember a rat.
The rat. Oh, come on, man! It was the coolest thing in the whole game. It should have been the USP that they put on front of every piece of marketing. So
with the little thing that you could, the little like robotic one that you could shoot people with,
and it had a kit on its back, and the kit was a camera and a explosive, and you'd catch the rat, right? This would be really cool, and then you'd find a place to hide, right? Because it's multiplayer and people are trying to kill you. You put the rat down and you could drive him around. What the hell? I was playing a brand new game that has a recon drone in it that does exactly the same thing, right? And you can drive this thing around and see the other guys, and then you could sneak under a bunch of them and detonate the thing, and then they'd all blow up. So this thing was really cool. And it was, of course, while you're driving it, you're completely vulnerable. So there's a trade-off. Yeah.
It was literally Junkrat's Rip Tire 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah, it was kind of amazing. No, you're right. It was way ahead of its time. The pre-release reviews were amazing, right? I mean, I think there were a lot of problems there. The publisher that was handling it, they were responsible for QA and approval of the final release. And
but wait, we got to get to that part.
All right, okay. So they've got this really slick multiplayer game, and it was originally designed to have basically just kind of like a ladder system, a lot like Unreal Tournament had in it.
It was basically Unreal Tournament.
No single player campaign because that was way beyond the budget. So about 3 months into the project, they get this brilliant idea that they're going to make their opus in their first game, and they put a whole, 19 or 20 level single player campaign into this thing that had both ally and opponent non-player character NPCs in the game. That is, I mean, that's anybody who makes games knows how incredibly difficult that is to get right. And also,
it's hard to get right today, much less back then.
And then it was just like, it was brilliant, but and completely beyond the scope. And the other thing was they had it so that if any member of your NPC squad died during a level, you had to go back to the beginning of the level And these NPCs were so stupid. You remember the docks? The docks were great. You'd be going on the docks, you'd be sneaking along. I mean, fortunately, the enemy NPCs were stupid too, so you could kill them pretty easily. But behind you, one of these stupid fuckers would walk off the dock and drown himself, and the next thing you'd know, for no reason at all, you'd be back at the beginning of the level.
Oh, that sucks.
So basically, and when they came up with this brilliant idea, instead of going to the publisher and doing what they didn't talk to me about this.
They didn't talk to me about it either.
Right. They went to the publisher and just told them that they were going to build this extra game for free. You know, they said, we want to do this and this and this. And in addition to the multiplayer game that you've already agreed and we budgeted appropriately, we're going to add this whole additional level of gameplay to it if it's okay with you, right? And they didn't go to them and say, but it will require an additional 8 months and we'll need an additional $1 million or something like that, right? They just said they'd do it. And of course, the publishers shrugged their shoulders and said, sure, okay.
Absolutely. And the thing is, Tom and I had both told them, because they had said, we'd like to do a multiplayer. And we had both said, okay, but leave it out of this right now. Because Tom was in his office in Miami. I was actually with the developer at the publisher's office, their building, and we, it was a full day, 2-day thing. We sat down and we went through a lot of the contract, and so I'd have to get up from the room and go outside and call Tom, and Tom's like, why the fuck are they doing that? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm here, we're doing this. The whole time, we were both like, don't mention the single player. Everything to this point has been negotiating a multiplayer only game. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. And then it wasn't even like it was weeks later. I want to say that sometime over dinner that night, they told them they'd do it. And it was just like, oh my God. And so, yeah, I mean, including that single player part, one, from a business point of view, they literally gave away $500,000 or $1 million. I mean, because it was not going to be.
Well, and they released a game that went from having, pre-release reviews were just amazing. People were, they thought it was going to be a really great game. And when it came out, I believe it got like 4s and 5s. I mean, it was really incredibly broke. It should not have been released. I mean, it could have been fixed, but I was at GDC with them when they got the green light for the GM release. And I think it was just because the publisher had done a couple of guarantee deals with sub-licensors. Basically, if a publisher doesn't sell games in a certain territory, let's say Eastern Europe, they contract with somebody there, and the guy pays them, $100,000 for the first X number of units, and then they go from there. Well, that was sort of like, okay, he kept that. He made himself whole on a couple of deals like that, I think, and basically after that didn't really care that much. The game had not been tested or anything. I think instead of testing the game because it was right for release, he just finally gave up and released it. So it was release broken, very broken. But I remember being at dinner with those guys in San Jose, and Lee from Midway at the time, Lee Jacobson, still a good friend, was at the table next to us. I'd spent a long time trying to do. I'm getting my deals mixed up. That wasn't it. Never mind.
Different horror story.
No, we did close in San Jose. No, that was another deal that went very well for us. But yeah, it was amazing. We were so happy, and then we were so sad. And they finally and the publisher would not pay to patch the game. They needed $10,000 to patch the game. And he said, "No, you want to patch it yourself."
It was absolutely.
The other thing that was really weird about that is the head of the company was their lead artist. And this guy's one of the best artists he's best environmental artist I know in the world. He's really brilliant. But he was also running the company. Well, the guy's an artistic genius, but his feet aren't on the ground. He lives in his imagination. So he had some misconceptions about, for example, he thought that Recoup was done off of $1, as opposed to recouping out of the developer's share of the proceeds. And keep in mind, this is retail. Back in the retail days when I think they were getting something like 14% net or something, it was minuscule, and certainly they were never going to be able to recoup the development budget. But he was just certain that they were going to recoup the advances dollar for dollar on the revenue, which wasn't the way it was set up.
Well, to be fair, a lot of times back then, everybody had a different version of recoupment anyway. So,
what do you mean back then? They still do.
That's true too. Absolutely true. So,
but I think now the norm is that it's 100% recouped on revenue. At least that's most of the stuff I've seen recently.
Yeah. The takeaway here is, if you're going in to pitch a game and you're negotiating on that game, but don't go in and don't ever give away stuff for free. That's rule number one. But certainly don't go in and tell your publisher that you're just going to throw in a single player version for free, because it caused innumerable headaches when they did that.
I was talking to somebody yesterday about starting up a studio, and one of the things I said to him was, there is no back end.
Yeah.
If you can find somebody who's willing to fund your game, you better make sure that there's a profit margin built into the development budget, because you can never count on seeing $1 on the back end. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Sure, it happens, and when it does happen, it's a wonderful thing. But if the survival of your studio is dependent upon a royalty stream from a publisher who's funded your game with a recoup, you're living in a very, very dangerous world.
Yes,
exactly. It does remind me of it's not a specific horror story, but I know this happens over and over and over again. And that is, I've been talking with so many indies, and every time then they're roughly around 90% of finishing the game, and they're like, yeah, and we're still planning to throw in multiplayer. And then I always have to say, because I hear this over and over again, and then I have to say, yeah, but if you do, they have to realize that you're only at 50% of the total development. You're throwing your back at least half of the project, because getting in the online multiplayer and you haven't been preparing for it, that's so much work. But this, I swear, this is what I hear at every event, at least 2-3 times by different developers. Yeah, we're going to throw in multiplayer, not knowing how much more work they are actually giving themselves.
That's kind of like,
multiplayer.
That's kind of like, we're almost done with the game. Let's figure out how we're going to market it now.
There's just a tremendous amount of discipline that's required, and I think that by their nature, creative people want to make the best thing they can, and convincing someone to that's a really nice feature, you should put that in the next game. They think that they get so deep into developing a game that they think it's the only game they're ever going to make in their whole lives, and they either put stuff in that really doesn't fit with either the gameplay or the narrative in that piece, or it's not really adding anything except for it's a cool thing, right? This is really cool, we should put it in the game. No, this is really cool, you should think whether it belongs in this game or whether maybe it's a whole different game.
That's what Tom and I used to have a saying, and I guess still do. It's like someone would come up with something in the middle of a negotiation or a pitch, or it happened in that situation that we were talking about, and it was our response is always, that is a fantastic idea, save it for the sequel. It's just like, stop while you're ahead. But I think that it sucks to say this, but creativity and passion in our industry is actually one of the reasons we have a lot of the problems that we do, because people want to put their best stuff out there, so you end up with games that get feature creeped to hell and back, and you end up with the situations that we're seeing now with Rockstar, like bragging about their 100-hour work weeks, and people continue to allow themselves to be taken advantage of in a lot of situations, because they look around and they're like, and you can see it in a lot of these responses. It's like, I wanted to, get the best game possible out the door.
Yeah, but
like,
it's the same problem in every creative industry. Like, I used to be an illustrator. I made greeting cards for Hallmark, and time again, you have these companies like, hey, can you do this and that for us for free? But it will help discover your talents. Every time again. It's also among musicians, among writers, and they all fall for it because they have, oh, I got a chance to take this podium and showcase what I'm capable of. They are it's also with developers. They're so, sorry to say, close-minded within their own bubble of creating the game. They forget about everything outside of it. And if they think about it, they don't acknowledge how just as detailed, complex it is as what they're doing themselves. They don't understand the whole sales. They don't understand the whole marketing, communication, PR, social media, you name it. It's like even on the Discord, I had this guy, this already had a few times. Hey, I'm going to do this Kickstarter tomorrow.
Yes.
How can I get out there? And then I get it, but every time somehow I just keep on hitting my head against the wall again and again. But I get it, but it's so hard to hear every time again. I really feel sorry for these guys with sometimes the most amazing projects, but no idea of that the whole business side is at least as complex as just making the game itself.
Yeah, exactly. And we know those people because I saw that, I don't know if it was the same exact person, but there was a person the other day that said, I'm going to launch it in a week or so. And I'm like, you need to have been thinking about this a month ago. 3 months ago, a long time ago. And there was a whole thread on Reddit yesterday that I saw. And it's like, if you had $50,000 to put into marketing of your game, what would you do? And there were people in there that said, oh, don't do that. You'd be much better off getting a character artist. And, it is. You look around and you just want to kind of slam your face into the desk a few times and move on. But you can't reach everyone.
That's true. Or another thing that what I noticed is that because they're so into their own bubble, even if you tell it to them straight, it still doesn't land. Like this guy was already 8 days into their Kickstarter campaign, and he was like, but it wasn't going so well. So I was like, well, you can go to these guys, but if you now want to try to get something done, then you will have to throw in a shitload of money. And while it's better to just stop and prepare a new one and then invest the money in the whole preparation. Doing it now, it won't work. So they were like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Next thing I know, I get a reply from the guy that I was advising them to. And he's like, hey, I got this person coming here and he thinks I can save his project right now.
It's one of those things that people often disregard or dismiss what they don't understand. And a lot of companies don't understand how important it is to start planning ahead for, when you're going to launch and what you're going to do and marketing and, with a Kickstarter, building a community before you actually go out there and do it. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day and, he's like explaining this game, which, should be a AAA game, but I'm not, willing to wager completely on that yet. And he said, the market that they're going to, he goes, it's a team-based multiplayer combat game. He goes, and they're going to release it the day after Fallout 76. And he's like, tell me where that makes sense. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense.
Brilliant.
But you can't convince somebody of that.
Yeah, but we're gonna sell on the success and the reach out of that game, so we ride that wave. I don't know.
But you know,
I mean,
Red
Bethesda
Dead,
puts out another build that deletes your entire folder when you hit the install button. So
I thought this was kind of weird, but Red Dead Redemption was released right in the middle of TwitchCon. I mean, the day after TwitchCon started, that's when they released it. It's Red Dead Redemption, it's not like an indie game or anything. So
Poor thing crashed. What, it only had $700 million in sales in the first 3 days.
yeah,
really.
I know. So, hey Tom, I think you can turn your camera on. I think I got it figured out where we can bounce back and forth. That's because no one cares about TwitchCon.
Man. My hair's a mess.
Hey, look, Tom. As long as you don't take the mic and go to the bathroom again, we're all good.
That's why I leave my hat on.
Not too bad. Look at it, guys. I came ready.
With a pink brush.
Pink brush. Hey, somebody's got to have a pink brush. Let me see. Oh, I know what I did. I moved the camera here. That's kind of freaky.
Tom, what was the one of the Nintendo launched? I don't remember if it was the GameCube or the Wii. One of the Nintendo consoles launched in the middle of GDC one year.
Oh, I don't know. They're those you're talking about the mystery of marketing people. I don't understand them.
It could be the GameCube. I believe the Wii was at the end of the year.
Yeah, I just thought those decisions are made in marketing departments, and they've always been the enemy of my people. It's terrible thing to say, but
my team is not going to do this. There we go.
It's them.
So, Andy, talking about nightmare scenarios, how was TwitchCon?
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, the first day was a complete. So it's like you're supposed to get their partners get in early, affiliates were supposed to get in early. When you got out front, it was just a mess of people, thousands of people out front, lined up on the street. There was there were people trying to organize, but they didn't work for Twitch. So I'm like, okay, where is this line? And they're like, I don't know. So I had to it took me 15 minutes to weed through the crowd and walk through and be like, where's the line? I must have asked 10 people and nobody knew. So finally we got to a line, and it wasn't really a line. There were little lines that came out, and then it was just a cluster of people just in every direction. And some people apparently stood in line for 3.5 hours to get in. I had to stand in line for a good 45 minutes probably. But then after the first day, I realized that there were side entrances, and there was nobody there. Nobody in the line. So the next day when I came, I just walked up the stairs and walked in and scanned my bags. And from the parking lot, from parking my truck to being at the booth, it was a good 5 minutes. Yeah, I am the line. And people were cutting and nobody knew shit. And then they ran out of tickets because the whole thing was...
What?
The whole thing was that you would be able to buy tickets there. But I guess a lot of people flew in and they didn't buy their tickets. They expected to buy them there. And then they flew in and they were out of tickets. And so a lot of people the first day didn't even get in there. A lot of people the first day didn't get in. I don't know what happened. The next day it was much better organized. They sent out an email. But I didn't even go to the front. I just went to the sidelines from then on. So I
saw people on Reddit that were saying, they had only bought a Friday pass, and they waited in line for 3 hours to get their badge, and then they had to go wait in a second line for 3 hours to actually get into the show.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's was some disorganization. But you know what? Get your badge early. Order your badge online. You still have to order it, but then you have to go through a line and get it. And the partner line wasn't so bad, but it was a lot bigger than last year. Last year the partner lounge was it was the size of a small bar, and this time the partner lounge was huge, and they had an outdoor porch, and there was probably capacity of probably 500-600 people. That's how it was. There wasn't that many people in there, but it was really big. Beyond that, I saw the fake Dr. Disrespect. Someone dressed up as Dr. Disrespect. I fist bumped him. I don't know. It was a good show, but except for that whole line thing at the very beginning.
So, what are they showing at the show?
What's at the show? Well,
there's booths.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, they had a charity section. Would had like, I don't know if Wounded Warrior Project was there, but there's like player. I have some cards here. StackUp.org was there. There was about 5 or 6 or 7 little booths for charity. They sold a bunch of merch. There was 4. I don't have my cup here. You know, the gaming, like GG Sups or whatever. There was 4 booths with supplements. There was 4 booths that had gaming chairs.
So a lot of it was vendors that want to sell stuff or promote stuff through streamers to sell to consumers.
Yeah, or for streamers to buy. There's a new audio processor thing called the Go XLR or XLR Go or something like that, and it's like my thing that does the voices like this, that does all the scary voices, but it has a bunch of different effects. Plus, it has an EQ built in, which mine doesn't have. It has a noise gate built in and a compressor, and it was awesome. And it was about $400, and I want one really bad. That was one thing that I really wanted. Let's see what else did they had. Yeah,
well,
but,
look,
and then there was like
go over to
Black
Heine's,
Desert Online was there. War Gaming was there.
All you have to do is go to the Netherlands because Santa comes twice there. So
I thought Krampus comes there
twice the opportunity.
Santa goes twice to the Netherlands.
You missed that whole conversation.
Yeah, it's not kidding. It's not kidding. It's serious. We got him the 5th of December, and of course with the 24th, 5th.
Why do you get Santa on the 5th of December?
It's a long story, but basically we got him first. Then we dragged him all the way to New Amsterdam, which became New York. Then we lost our ties with that part, and later on in the Second World War, we got him back on another date.
So basically, they sent Santa to us. We repackaged him with Coca-Cola and sent it back to them and sold it to them again. So,
and 95% of the Dutchies don't even know that they're celebrating the guy. That's really fun.
I imagine if you're growing up and you have a Christian parent and then a Jewish parent, like my neighbors, as a kid, you should absolutely rack up if you get like Saint Nick on the 5th of December, and then you get Hanukkah, and then you get Christmas again. You're basically getting presents all of December.
Yeah, pretty much.
And what if your birthday's in December? Then you really luck out, right?
Oh man,
no, because my birthday is the 18th, and my wife is the 15th, and my dad's the 27th, and my grandfather was the 24th. It was crazy. It was a madhouse. It wasn't fun, especially not with divorced parents. That was December. No fun.
That's funny.
So I'll go through. I'll tell my big horror story, and this happened 5 years ago, maybe. So we were working with. I'm not even going to narrow this down into what industry it is. A license, and it was, it's not a AAA license, but it was a solid AA license. Something that's going to command a 6-figure, advance and minimum guarantee. And, we were repping it like an agent. So we got a percentage. Now you get a much higher percentage licensing an IP than you get when you, work as an agent for a game or a movie or something like that. You usually get, 20, 25%. So it's a good payday, if we're looking at this. But you had to go out and find the development team or the publisher that was passionate about that IP, or it wasn't going to be nearly as lucrative. So we spent about a month working with the licensor, getting the package together, explaining why this is good and what they'll do to support the game on the back end. And there was a lot they could do. This is something that had a movie in the talks. The company that held the IP was talking to like Netflix and a couple of other, some like the CW or some of the actual TV channels about a television series. There was a lot going on with this. And we get it and we send it out, and we sent this thing to probably 200, companies globally that, we knew would be a good fit for it and could actually afford to do it, the right way. And we got a studio, a smaller studio, but they were an up and coming self-publishing developer. They had some funding, they were absolutely ridiculously nuts about the IP. And they're like, we want to do this. We have to do this. And I was like, okay. So we framed out the deal memo, like the 1-page thing that you sign while you're negotiating the 20-page, 40-page thing. And, there was a 6-figure minimum guarantee or advance on this thing. It wasn't advance, actually. It wasn't even a minimum guarantee. So, it was clear from the get-go that when the deal was signed, they owed X amount of money, whatever it was. And I don't remember it at the time, but it wasn't like a shock. Then we spent the next 6 months negotiating the contract. And we're not talking about a 100-page contract. I mean, it was probably 20, 30 pages, but the IP holder's lawyer had never done a game. And so there was some education going on between us and him. And it's like, this is why this is in there. This is why it's not in here, because he took the first agreement and I'm pretty sure redlined every line in the contract and rewrote it. And, we're going back and forth and, we're walking him through stuff. And it's like, he would completely blow up about something. But then when we got him on the phone and we're like, look, this is what's in there. He goes, oh, okay, now I get it. And so we've got that on one side. And then, the developer publisher is taking their, sweet time on their end as well. And, at one point they were getting another round of investment. And let's just say hypothetically, this IP was going to be, the advance was like 250 grand. The investor gets on the phone with me and goes, you need to explain to me why this is valued at this rate. And I'm like, well, bluntly, it's valued at that because your client would pay that. This is how the market thing works. What I went through and I said, there's this movie going on and there's this opportunity, and games in this genre tend to sell, this many units, and I gave him all the business points of it. But the reality was, this is the number that was agreed to. If you're not happy with your, developer, your investment's ability to negotiate a contract, it doesn't work. We're not going to be able to help you there. So it goes on and on and on. Finally, we get to the point where the contract is ready to be signed. We go back and forth with all the last little things here and there. And everybody's happy and everybody's celebrating, and the developer signs the contract and the IP holder signs the contract. And I'm like, yes. And so we all send invoices around. Silence. And, I'm like, all right, well, maybe, they're busy. Maybe some shit's going on. So a week goes by and I'm like, hey, sent you an invoice. Where are we on that? Nothing. 2 weeks goes by, 3 weeks. And finally, I start getting a little shitty, as I am prone to do from time to time when I'm not getting paid. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then we started getting communication, but it was all, excuses, basically. Then they call a meeting, but the developer goes, we only want to talk to the IP holder. We don't want Jay involved. And I'm like, all right, whatever, I don't care. And so they have this meeting, and then the guy from the IP called me and he goes, so the reason they haven't sent any money is they don't have any money. They never had the money. And I'm like, this is not like something that got sprung on them. For 6 months, we've been negotiating a contract that says this amount of money is due on contract signature. He goes, oh, yeah. But it gets better. They say the only reason they signed the contract is because you made them do it. Like, how exactly do I have the ability to? I was like, I can't even make my own clients do things most of the time. You know, how am I supposed to make a developer, publisher sign an agreement that they negotiated for 6 months that they didn't, that they obviously didn't want to sign if I made them sign it? And so, you know, it never happened. The whole deal imploded. And, you know, I actually to this day have a little piece of memorabilia from that IP that I keep on my desk at all times to remind me that no matter how good things can be going on a contract, a deal, or anything, it can all go to shit in a heartbeat when you have people that are willing to negotiate a contract for 6 months, knowing damn well they don't have the money to pay for it.
Yeah.
Ouch.
How about having a capricious person on the other side of a deal? We negotiated with Activision. Well, let's see. Can I talk about this? I don't know. This is a long time. So one of my clients did a lot of physical arcade games, and we were working on a license to do an install version, like an arcade version of Guitar Hero. Right, really great IP, right? And we spent about a year negotiating this deal, and I mean, seriously, a year. You know, something like that's pretty complicated. We had negotiated with a company in Korea to build the units. We had a custom designer who had designed basically a hardened version of their air guitar thing, so that you could actually use it in an arcade and it would fall apart in 2 weeks. I mean, you know, these guys are professionals at what they did. They really knew what they were doing. And the whole deal was done. It was fully documented, ready to go. And because it was it was a $1 million guarantee up front, right? Which is basically, for those who don't know, when you guarantee it, you're saying, here's $1 million. That covers the first $1 million in royalties we're going to pay you. And then after that, you continue to receive royalties. But it's a guarantee that you're going to at least make them that much money on the license. And I think the license deal was pretty good. It was about, I think it was under 10%. So it was a really good deal for us, except for the $1 million, which we had finally been able to line up investors to do this. And, this, you know, you're orchestrating a deal like this with this many moving parts, and it's pretty crazy. And then because it was a 7-figure deal, it had to be approved by the CEO, Bobby. And it got to Bobby's desk, and he said, "Nah, just go with Konami." He didn't look at the capabilities, and they put out. I don't know if you've ever seen these things in the arcades, but they're just always broken. They're really crap, you know. But that was like, geez, a year of my life gone. You know, my poor clients are just devastated. But you know, you can't count on these things coming through. It's you know, this is what business is like. You know, I don't know, these developers. Next time I hear a developer say, "Oh, I just want to deal. I just don't want to deal with that," I'm going to say, you know, fine, then get a job. You know, if you don't want to run a company, get a job. If you want to run a company, if you want to make your own shit and be your own boss, it means running a company, and there's no way around it. And you got to take a beating, everyone. I got a client right now that's taking a beating, and you know, I said, you know, I put him in a great position, but unfortunately, he wasn't in a financial position to follow through. You know, it doesn't matter how good the contract is if you pay to enforce it. So you got to have a war chest too. If you want to play with the big boys, you got to have a war chest, because these multi-million-dollar companies will push you around, really, really, really a lot. Is that the right way to say that?
Because they know they can.
Big
Well, if
league.
you can't enforce the terms of the contract, then you're really in a position where you're at a huge disadvantage. You can, I mean, you know, I mean, this one, I can't even talk about it. I had my client in a position where we could have walked with the game after a 7-figure investment by the publisher because they screwed up. I had him in a fucking box, but they dropped a lawsuit on us, so we had to pull. Because my client, instead of putting all that extra money that he was receiving into the bank in case something went wrong, he put it all into the game. God, have I heard this before?
Yeah.
Are we just telling the same story over and over? This is 25 years, same friggin' story. No wonder I'm getting bored with this shit.
Doing business in this industry is like Groundhog Day. You know, you get up every morning and you're like, what do you mean they didn't pay their bill? Of course they didn't.
Am I running in circles?
And you're like, when something really fucked happens, you're all just kind of like, okay, let's do the next thing.
But it is, and that's how you end up being like so jaded and cynical, like Tom and I are. It's because you see this shit over and over.
Can you talk about anything else, Jay?
Can I?
I mean, I guess if it's vague, right?
We can talk about anything.
There was this thing that happened, right?
Exactly.
Now we're speaking of hypotheticals here. These aren't real stories.
Yeah, this is not real shit. This is just
hypotheticals. Things that could have happened in some imaginary world we live in.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, everybody can share as much as they want. You know, they're the ones that sign the NDAs with whoever story they're telling. You know, it's
I don't sign NDAs. My clients do, so I don't care. No, just kidding. You know, I used to do a roundtable. See, I did it every several years, and it was basically a confidential roundtable where people could talk about issues they had with publisher deals. I thought it was a really good feature. And the idea was we would speak hypothetically about possible situations that could occur with a publisher, which was code for it. Come on in and spill the beans. We all need to know this shit if we're going to succeed as a. And we're pretty good. I don't know. The folks at GDC didn't want to make it an institution, I guess. Or I piss somebody off. I piss a lot of people off. That's the latter, I know.
50-50 on that one. But you know.
Showing up drunk for your 9 o'clock presentation probably is not the best thing to do. But who hasn't done that? Come on.
To be fair, Tom, it's you know, you're wrongly singled out here simply because you host a Scotch night in your hotel. You know,
I get that. I had a guy call me yesterday because somebody he works with went to breakfast with me after getting drunk this year at GDC, and I have no idea who it was because I was drunk. And I'm thinking, what a great industry where these lawyers are supposed to be like smart people who you rely on their intellectual ability to help, you know, protect your company. And yet in my industry, our industry, I actually get credit for getting drunk with my friends and clients, and it benefits my business, which is just crazy. Isn't it?
But it's right up your alley though, right?
You know, the odd thing is, it's not like I sit here and drink all day long. I very seldom do I drink when I'm at home.
It's not like you have a keg in the office or anything.
I can't imagine who would have that.
I've probably got a bottle of scotch around. You know, it's not like I can't drink that shit anymore. It tears me up. And I live in Washington, so why would I drink anymore?
Exactly.
I was one of my very first trade shows. We had a client from Sweden, and we were in London, so it had them an ECTS. And I go back to the room, and I'm leaving, and my boss is in the room, you know, next to us, and he sees me going, and as he was going into his room, he goes, "Where are you going?" And I'm like, "I'm going out to drink with blah blah blah, the client." And he just looks at me and laughed and just says, "Don't die," and shuts the door to his room. And I'm like, how could this possibly be? You know, we're just going out to have a few drinks.
Who was it? Wargaming? God.
No, this was 20 years ago. This was a long time ago too. What I failed to understand is, you know, when I was fresh out of college, I had a fairly high tolerance for alcohol. These guys drink vodka like it was water. And so
it was Russians, wasn't it?
Have you been to the Polish party?
Oh God, man.
Every time I turned around, if I wasn't paying attention, they ordered another round of shots. And so I'm sitting there having a business conversation on like the middle of the room while they're back at the table. And I look over there and there's like 4 shot glasses lined up. And I'm like, oh my God. And so
Jay, you're falling behind here.
I know. It's like you got to play catch up, you know. So I go back and, you know, I'm doing my damnedest to, you know, hold a coherent conversation with the people that I'm not there with because, you know, they were all drunk, and I was too. I made it through the night, but by the time I got ready to leave, and this is one of those things that looking back, if it had happened now, I probably wouldn't be here. I get in the cab and told I somehow remembered the hotel that I was in, and told the cabbie, I just like stuck my hand in my pocket and pulled out a bunch of money and put it in his hand, and I said, I have this much. I don't know how much money I gave him, if it was enough, if it was more than enough. I may have paid the dude 80 pounds to drive me around the corner. I didn't, no clue. But I didn't get knifed, and I made it back to the hotel okay. But it was, yeah. The lesson learned is, if you're going out to celebrate a deal with the Swedes, you better pay attention to who's ordering the vodka.
Yeah. No, I will tell you that as overly intoxicated as I've gotten at conferences, somebody always had my back. Somebody always, even when I didn't know, somebody got me back to my room. Or I always ended up back in my room. Frankly, a couple of times I have no idea how I. My favorite one was at the Dice conference in Vegas, where I went down to the poker tournament, and I flew in late. Got there just in time for the Dice conference in Las Vegas. They have a charity poker tournament. It's not really a charity, it's just a poker tournament. And I like to play in it because I think I'm good, but I really suck at Texas Hold'em. Anyway, so I get there, and I drink on the plane, and I get there, and it's one of those things where I send my bag up to my room, and I've never been to my room, and I go right to the poker tournament, and they've got scotch there, and I'm drinking scotch and playing, and I'm buying back in, and it went downhill real fast. And like, I woke up on the floor of my room. I'm not sure how I got there. I didn't even know where my room was. I learned to follow. So the following year, I go up, I show at the tournament, and I'm thinking I'm going to be a pariah here, right? All these guys are going to fucking hate me, right? Nobody's giving me the stink eye except for the staff at the hotel, right? The people who work the bar. They're all looking at me like I'm poisoned, and all the other the developers and these high-level people, and they're all looking at me like, oh, that's he'd probably do it again this year.
That's hilarious.
But these are war stories. We're supposed to be talking about things that enhance that will enhance the future of the people watching this, if there are any. And we're talking about going and getting drunk at conferences. I think there's something wrong with this.
That's a big part of it.
That is the lesson for this part. It's you don't go out and get completely and utterly hammered at these shows, because I mean I've seen CEOs groping interns at these shows because they get far too drunk to be doing what they're doing. Yes, going out and having drinks after the show, it is a very big part of the social aspect of this industry. That's just what everyone does. But you got to do it in moderation, and you have to be careful.
You sound like your mother.
I know.
When I was at TwitchCon, I didn't go out drinking. I mean, I went and had a couple drinks, and that was it.
I think you do it when you can. I can't do. I used to go. I mean, seriously, at GDC, I'd get my suite, and I'd stock it with liquor on Sunday night, and then entertain. These little, these puny little companies like EA and Microsoft. They have a 3-hour party. My party went from Sunday night to Saturday morning. And I mean, I went hard. I would go till 4 o'clock in the morning, except when my son Thomas was there, and then we'd go to, he's a programmer. He doesn't even sleep. So we'd go till 8 o'clock in the morning, and then he'd go to sleep, and I'd have a meeting at 10, right? So after a week of that, I'd be pretty much wasted. But I did that for years. I can't do it. I mean, I went back to my room last year, like at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Like a little baby. But yeah, I think, I got to tell you, some of my favorite moments you guys know Ivar? Crazy Ivar from Norway? I don't know his last name.
I don't know.
Really weird guy. Gets right up in your, like 2 inches from your face and says, when you first meet the guy, right? And he's tall. He's like a fucking Viking, right? And he gets right in your face and he says, looks you in the eye and says, do I make you nervous? What the fuck are you doing? So like he did that to me one year, and I ran into him the next year out in front of my hotel, and I'm thinking, okay, now this guy's nuts, but I kind of like him, right? Because he's a character, and I love character. I surround myself, and I want to surround myself with weird people because it's fun. So anyway, so I have this moment of, do I tell him where the suite is this year, or do I just move on down, right? Because it's sort of an open secret, but you know, he's the kind of person where if I didn't tell him where it was, he wouldn't come. You know, he's a decent guy, not like some of these people who are just looking for a free drink. So I tell him, and he becomes a fixture at the suite. But I remember a couple times. What's the deal with? Is this everybody in Scandinavia? All you guys get a little mod early in the morning, like before sunrise, and start. He would start. We'd have these great things, and we'd talk about, you know, procedural generation of story and games and all this weird shit, you know, and he'd be there, and he'd make everybody quiet down, and then he'd talk about how we're all going to die someday.
Quite the optimist.
But I remember one time this guy, he was one of the few people I've ever seen there older than me, and he had been in the industry since the 80s. Real old timer, and I'm sure if I could remember his name, you guys would go, "Oh yeah, I've heard of him." But he was still working in a company, and at the time, my suite was sort of an odd combination of, you know, Marty O'Donnell and Jeff Tennell in one corner of the room talking to each other, and somebody else over here with 4 or 5 game students, right, talking about what they were doing. You know, it was very egalitarian. The only requirement to really be welcome was that you had to love games, right? And so I would get a very broad sense. And this guy is sitting there quietly weeping because he said he'd forgotten why he was doing this. And being there reminded him the fact that he did it because he loved games, and he felt bad because he'd been phoning it in for about 15 years, you know. And it turned into a job instead of a passion, and all of a sudden he was in a room full of people who had passion, and I thought it was really good for him. It was wonderful for me to see. Sometimes something happens that just makes you feel good.
It is absolutely a reality though, because I mean, like I've said before, I took this year and I didn't go to any conferences. You know, I was like, it was one, I traveled too much last year, and I was just like, I don't like being.
Some conferences, I don't know if I could not show up at GDC.
I didn't go this year. I have not gone to a single conference.
That just felt weird the whole time.
Yeah, it does. But you know, part of the reason is, you know, what you just said. These shows are a good time for us all to get together, aside from the business aspect of it, just on the social aspect of it, because I've been that guy before. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and every now and then you just get, you know, kicked enough times that even with somebody that's, you know, got the tough skin that I have, you just want to go, fuck it, and I'm going to go be that guy that, you know, catches the fish coming off the boat and throws them into the ice. You know, I'm done with this. But, you know, I always come back to the fact that I'm still in this industry because I absolutely love this industry. I do this show because I want other people to be able to be successful enough to continue to work in an industry that they love. And I'll get that same, you know, deep-seated jadism, you know, cynical, why are we all doing this? It's all going to suck in the end anyway. And then I'll go to a conference and I get surrounded by, you know, a lot of people who are very, very passionate about it. And that's why I, even over all these years, still tend to gravitate towards the indie developers, because they're the ones that, you know, get excited about all this stuff. And when they get excited, I'm like, oh, I'm excited too. And this is why I remember why I do this. And, you know, there's a certain amount of catharsis that goes along with, you know, going to these conferences, even, you know, beyond all the real reasons that we should be at the conference. It's just to sit around and you know, get to hang out with friends. And I'll tell you a prime example, Tom, that you're in. It was a guess it had to have been a Casual Connect because we were in Seattle. Right? Shit, I don't know. It might have been GDC. One show years ago, we ended up after it wasn't even, it was like before dinner. And it was me and you and my boss at the time, who was a client of yours, and John Field, who will actually, I can say, be on the show Friday.
Oh, he's great.
Oh, he's awesome. Yeah. And we all sat around and we were talking about everything from game design to, Dungeons and Dragons experience that we had, because John, at the time worked at Wizards and was in charge of all the D&D licensing.
Doesn't he?
No, he doesn't.
What?
Oh.
Remind me later. I'm just
yes. That's a recent development. But it was one of those evenings where you just kind of take a step back from where you are and the craziness. And these conferences are crazy for me and my team, because we end up, a lot of what we do is manage conferences for developers and publishers. Sit down with them and say, okay, here's your game. These are the people that you need to be talking to. And then we go out and get those meetings and book those meetings and prep the meetings and make sure everybody shows up for the meeting. So conferences are a crazy ass time, all the way around for us. But it was one of those nights where you just kind of like sit back and relax, and you can be yourself, and you can, hang out with your peers and talk about stuff that, it's not business for a few hours. And it was awesome. I mean, it's one of my fondest, conference memories.
Do I have to cut in here for a moment? But hey, weren't we supposed to talk about horror stories?
Well, yeah.
I like the stories. I like the we were telling, but I'm like, have we been talking about horror stories in the last 20, 30 minutes?
All right, somebody tell something bad. You get to come to this industry, from other industries. So what's like some of the crazy shit that you've seen that could have been prevented?
For me, it's more the small stories. And when I'm talking about the small stories, I'm talking about all those indies that just start up and already are being cocked in such a hard way before the party has even started. Like, we had these students here in the Netherlands. They were still doing their school, but they had this game, and there was this very known publisher. I shall not name names, but they somehow got into contact with them, and they signed a deal with them. So they were very enthusiastic that they got a deal with them, because they're pretty known among indies. But eventually, it seemed they signed a contract in which they would only get 25%.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they also had to pay everything themselves. So going to events and things like that, nothing was being paid by the publisher. And worst thing of it all, I was at First Look, an event in the Netherlands. It was my first event myself that I was at, and they were on the other side. And next day, when the second day started, their laptop was also stolen. So just students who don't have a lot of money, everything went wrong, everything. So it was just thinking about it by these guys who are still in school and already having such an introduction to the industry that I just can't forget it. Even we're not talking about millions here, but still, dreams are getting squashed already at that stage.
Yeah, I think that there are a group of publishers that I think Jay knows probably all of them. I know several of them that are just basically bottom feeders who are out there taking advantage of the naivete of a lot of developers. I had this guy came to me once. He had it's a real weird niche game. It was sort of like a historical battle game. Not the type of game I play, so I'm not very familiar with the genre. But there was he was in a very early alpha stage, and his publisher had come and he ran into a publisher somewhere and showed him the game, and the guy said, "I really like this. I want to publish this. Let's sign a deal." right? So he signs a publishing deal with this publisher where he gives up a percentage of the revenue, and the publisher is going to distribute his game. Well, I think what happened to him psychologically is he'd been down in this game, making it, and wasn't looking 2 years down the line when he was going to try to release it, and all of a sudden, you know how creative people are. They're really judgmental on their own work, and they don't maybe have a level of confidence in what they're doing because they tear it apart every day, right? And I think his response was, "Oh my God, somebody likes my game.
Yeah.
A publisher likes my game. My gosh, I should sign this deal." Right? Well, the reality was it was a sucky deal. The publisher didn't do anything, right? He had no responsibilities to do anything but distribute the game if he wanted to, maybe later. So fast forward a couple years later, and he's kind of in a spot. You know, he needs some money to finish the game, to polish it, and to make it right. He's got a publisher who wants to give him the money, a different publisher, because this other publisher doesn't give people money; he just signs them the deals. And he goes to this first publisher and say, "Well, you know, I need to get out of our contract. I've got a publisher. Are you willing to do what they're doing?" He says, "Well, no. Why would I?" And he says, "Well, then you need to let me out of this deal so I can do it." And the guy says, "Yeah, I'll let you out of the deal for $25,000." Now, it's not a lot of money. It's not a tremendous amount of money, but for an indie, you guys know what that is. It's something they don't have. And what's he going to do? Go to this publisher who wants to give him money to build the game and say, "Yeah, and I need another 25 to buy myself out of a contract I signed 3 years ago."
That's exactly what I would have done.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. That's what he did, and it worked out okay. But the whole point being, you know, there was no reason for him to sign a distribution deal that early in the development process. Certainly not if there's no money attached to it, right?
Yeah.
But he was so anxious to have that security of having his publisher in place that he went ahead with it, and it was just a really, really poor idea, and it put him in a bad spot. And the fact that these fuckers, for lack of a better term, would do that to him is sad, but it's a reality that there's people like that out in the industry. And I think there's a lot of stuff going on with indies that where they all walk around with targets on their back.
There is very much a, you know, like I said, we track 500 publishers here, over 500 publishers, but we absolutely, unequivocally have tags on some of those publishers that says "do not send content," because we either know they've done stuff, you know, firsthand that was underhanded or sketchy or whatever, or we've seen repeated instances secondhand of them, you know, doing things like that. And we know that, you know, there's no way in hell we're going to send a client's game to that company. And you know, the first thing we do when we have a game ready to go out is we build the list, and then we show it to our client and say, "Here are the publishers that we're going to send it to. Let's see, you know, do you have any thoughts or questions about why we are sending it to somebody or why we're not sending it to somebody?" And when those companies get brought up, we tell them point blank, they've done this in the past, and I'm not going to trust them not to do it to you, you know, now. And, you know, there was a story that, you know, this was several years ago, and this was very public. I don't think it's anything that we can say, can talk about, but who was the company that Spryfox ended up having to sue?
Yeah, that was that was a weird one. So this is back in the day of when Facebook came forward. They were working on a game called Triple Town. I don't know if any of you played it. It's a brilliant game. It's sort of let me see if I could. It's an interesting design. You match adjacent items, and then they upgrade to a next item, and then you can match those items, and then they grow up. They match up to another thing. It's basically played on I believe it's a 8x8.
I mean, yeah,
it's
an entire subgenre now.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
That was 6 years ago.
Daniel Cook was a designer, and he did a really amazing job on it. So they were negotiating with this company Six Wave to release the game. I think it was a mobile deal maybe, and they also had the game coming out on mobile. But it was early on in the the pre-release area, and they delivered a build of the game to the publisher Six Wave, and they reviewed it and they were negotiating, and then David Edery, the head of the company, got a Facebook message from the biz dev guy that he'd been working there, that just said, David, I'm really sorry about this, but it was out of my control. And that was like, what? Right? And then Six Wave then released the mobile game called, what the hell was it called?
Yeti Town.
Yeti Town, right, as opposed to Triple Town, which was their game just reskinned. And it was
exactly
really
the same.
It was really their game reskinned. Now, those of us who live in the intellectual property may know, or I certainly do know, is that you can't really protect an idea. You cannot protect the rules of a game. You can protect the expression of those rules in the game, but you can't just protect the rules themselves. So it's very problematic when somebody steals your game. But what these guys did is, Triple Town had some really unique points. Like, for example, the power-ups that you could buy in game, there was actually a limited number of them. So you couldn't really just buy and buy and buy and buy and get further and further and further in the game, right? You had to buy with thought. Even buying shit was part of the game, right? And they also had, like, for certain things, like you could buy a bunch of coins to be able to buy stuff, and that had a discount on it, a specific percentage discount. And it also had this formula that they used. For example, if you combined 3 things, you would get a certain number of points. If you combined 4 things, you'd get a different number of points. You could actually manipulate the pieces so that you would actually have 5 pieces, right? And to combine to make something, and it all still made the same thing, but you would get more points depending on how complex. Or if, say, you did a combination of 3 things, which led to an additional combination of 3 or 4 things, which you could do if you set it up right, then you get super points for that, right? Every single one of those formulas was identical. Their instructions were identical. Their tutorial was almost identical, word for word. And it was sad because, I mean, I found out that the developer they used in Texas, former id Software guys, old school guys. I mean, I talked to John Romero about it, and he knew these guys. He was kind of surprised that they were doing this because it was clearly a hack job, right? I mean, clearly somebody gave them this game and said, reskin it and make it for us. And they were so fucking lazy that instead of, if they'd changed any of this stuff, you know, a little bit, they probably could have gotten away with it. So I found an IP lawyer for Spryfox, one of my clients, and I found an IP lawyer for this guy, Mark Lerbecki, here in Seattle, who's a kind of an animal. What you want for an intellectual property litigator, and very smart, and is very smart. Anyway, so they hired, you know, Dewey, Scrum and Howe in Silicon Valley, big giant company, and Mark was able to take it on a contingency fee, which means we didn't have to pay him money. He was willing to take it on a percentage of the revenue that was derived from it. And we didn't know whether if their game had been a success, they would have given us every cent they made. Apparently, unfortunately, we didn't realize that it wasn't. So it wasn't quite as a big hit as we thought. But we successfully, once they filed a motion to dismiss, claiming that you cannot copyright a video game, right? Which didn't go very well with the court. They made, and I mean, this is one of those cases where, as a lawyer, you get the documentation, you get their motion to dismiss, and you read it, and your heart makes you think, "Oh my God, we should never have filed this. It was a horrible mistake." It's that well written. It's a great argument. Unfortunately, it wasn't a winning argument. Unfortunately for them, it wasn't a winning argument. And we ended up prevailing in that case. And I can't say we won. I can say that a settlement was reached after the court denied their motion to dismiss. And as part of the settlement, they gave us all of the intellectual property involved in that game. They basically signed the game over to us.
Well, the game did shitty because everybody knew about the lawsuit.
Well, the lawsuit, we didn't fuck around with it, you know. I mean, but it's rare. I mean, at the same time, what Tiny Tower, I don't think had it. They went with some sort of moral argument by taking it to the press. We kind of did both. I'm big on that, boy. I think public ridicule is not a bad weapon to use if it's all you got.
No.
And I wouldn't hesitate to do it. I mean, the problem with that is, even suing, two things happen. All right, people understand that they can't fuck with you, and they understand they can't fuck with you, right? Well, so some people are going to go, okay, these people are competent business. I mean, come on. Dave Ettery has an MBA. Daniel Cook, their lead designer, has an MBA. These guys are, they understand business. They're in games like us because they love games. They can't help themselves, right? But at the same time, I think Ettery's one of the most savvy business people I know in the industry. I mean, he's really brilliant. Sometimes I work with clients who need my counsel. Mostly they just need my paperwork, But I do think that there are people who probably would be hesitant to work with them because they were that aggressive in enforcing their rights.
Which sucks. I mean, and the developer, the other developer, whoever did the hack job, they're not innocent in this either, because the level at which they replicated everything. I know for a fact nobody at Six Waves went through the game and wrote all this stuff down and sent them a design document to do.
No, here's the thing: Six Wave had a build. They just sent them
the only thing they could have done was sent them the build and go reskin that game. Just take all the stuff that's in it and do it that way.
Reprogram, and they were too lazy to change the line of. They just did everything they could. It's pretty funny. I mean, the weird thing was, in order to shut them up in the middle of the litigation, Six Wave bought their studio. Right?
Wait, they did?
Yeah, that's how. Yeah, now all of a sudden it's captive, and it's hard to subpoena them, or you're certainly not.
The Texas
get
studio.
Unbiased testimony out of an employee. You know that.
I thought you meant Spry Fox, but no, okay, yeah, the ones in
they bought the crappy hacks who copied the game for it. Yeah,
I mean,
I don't think they were ignorant of it. They saw this as a possibility, really, and the game did well, but it was. I mean, their games are always, critically acclaimed and moderately successful. But look, it's 6 years later, 7, 8 years later. They're 6 years.
I just Googled it. It was back in 2012.
Yeah. But they've been in business for a year or two. The reality is, survival is a difficult thing. I've represented I've tried to figure it out, about 200 developers, independent developers, over the 25 years of my career, and I suspect that there's probably 40 or so that are still operating, and the rest are gone.
Well, which is actually a fairly good ratio in this industry.
Well, that's because they had a good lawyer. I should go. I should take the time to go through and do that, but I'm trying to make a living.
A good point in this is ridicule and public shame are very good tools to use. You have to be careful, and you got to think 2 or 3 steps ahead. But I've had to do it before, and I had a client who went to they weren't getting paid by a publisher, and GDC was coming up, which is like the best time to threaten, public ridicule. And he said, if you don't pay me, I am literally going to follow you around GDC and tell everybody that you talk to that you don't pay your bills.
Yeah. Did it work?
Yeah, it worked.
The only problem I have with that public ridicule is being used so much nowadays for political reasons. I totally get where you're coming from, but it's now being heavily misused for just bad reasons, if you ask me. And
Well, yeah, that's what, you gotta put some thought into it. You can't just go and do it. But I have, absolutely no qualms. It's, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. It's not libel if it's true, right?
True that. Yep. Sure.
It's.
I agree. I agree. Say
I mean,
that,
under U.S. law, it's not libel if it's in the law. I can call you a dog fucker, send it to the newspaper, regardless of how false it is. I mean, I might get in trouble in court, but there's an absolute protection, free speech in court pleadings. It's really crazy.
Oh, I totally agree. But I'm just, now you have certain political ideologies making people out for certain labels in hope that they can't make any money their way.
Yeah. No, well, there's griefers, that's for sure. I had a client, he worked on this game for 7 years. I'm sure he won't mind me talking about this. It's Planetoid Pioneers, go get it on Steam. So, but he built this, he built the game engine and everything, and it's a 2D game engine that was built from the ground up to facilitate user-generated content. So basically, one user comes with an SDK, right? And a it uses Lewis script, and you can make assets for the game, and then you save them as a PNG file, which is basically portable. And then you can basically drag that into anybody else's game, and it loads up and plays. It's just really crazy. And it's a little more complex than that, but that's basically the model. It's built like that from the ground up. And this guy is so nice that Dantabar, that he set it up so that in the Steam model, we're going to do, first of all, he says anybody can share assets with anybody else in the game that they want to. You can make it. It's really about making stuff for a game and making a game than it is about being a game, right? And so anybody, it's completely integrated with the Steam Workshop, and you can make an asset and share it with anybody, share it with everybody. Just put it up and everybody can have it. Or the original idea was, or we would also have a curated area where we would vet the assets, right? And only put ones in there that were kind of on a higher level. And then people could buy those, and we'd share the developer's portion of the recovery 50-50 with whoever created it, which is better than the default deal on Steam, right? So this seemed like a really cool thing to be doing. And when we got close to releasing the game, we didn't implement the paid part during early access. And so when we're about to release the game and it comes time to pull the trigger to basically build out the curated area with the paid for assets so that people could basically, throw a bone to somebody who made something really cool. The word of this gets out, and the griefers fucking descended on us, and it was so intense. The negative comments were so intense that they basically shelved that whole idea of doing it, at least until now. I don't know if we'll ever do it, and I thought that was really sad because I thought this was a really great way to. I didn't see a downside to it. We're giving a better deal. We're giving people who like to make shit for games a place where they can make shit for games and maybe make a little if they want to, right? And they make the decision of whether they want to submit the game for curation or not. We don't pick them and say, oh, we're going to sell these because they're better. It was all about creating a positive win-win situation across all these different things. But these fuckers, I guess the whole thing with Bethesda trying to monetize mods that it had been giving away for free already, it's kind of put a stink on any sort of the sale of user-generated content, although people were doing it constantly, but it was sort of sad that they were so, I mean, I don't know, maybe he was just too timid and not willing to just say, screw you, this is really a good thing and I don't care what you think. But it was a real difficult decision for him to make, and I think it ultimately, harmed his studio and harmed the game. It would have been a neat contribution to the artistic community that we live in. I really like the fact that people are willing to take chances on stuff, and I think that this whole anonymous griefer bullshit that we have to deal with both in our industry, and I think we saw it in our industry early. and what's happened in society. It's just, all part of the same thing. I don't know. Let's not go there. Please don't bring that
Yes,
shit up.
let's not. 'Cause I have to go to a Halloween party. Like, now.
Hey, we wanted a horror story.
Yeah, it was a horror story.
So there you go.
All right. You all are more than welcome to keep, running through stories and telling all this stuff, but I do need to roll because I've got to.
Same here.
Hey,
I still got 12 minutes on my laptop.
So thanks to both of y'all. This is the kind of thing that, it's not only catharsis, but it is educational. And Tom, I agree with you. They should never have canceled that piece of GDC because people need to know this shit. It happens and we can't hide it.
What you're doing here. I mean, this is.
That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, exactly. So, that's going to be it for today. If you are going trick-or-treating tonight, be careful. Don't get run over by a car. Keep your kids careful.
And make sure you watch all the spoopy movies that you can.
Yes, exactly.
We've DVR'd all the Friday 13th, all of the Halloweens, and a bunch of other stuff. So
we're good. Try to figure out why in the Halloween, as the guy on the radio said yesterday, you don't just you don't even have to run from Michael Myers. A brisk walk will get you away from him. Why don't you just leave the area?
all right.
Hey, has any of you guys been playing Black Ops?
No,
not yet.
Oh, well then you won't get it. But I got to do this.
It's like the things in Fallout too.
This is actually these things are weapons in Black Ops. When you fight zombies, it's funny. Anyway, goodbye.
Hey, goodbye all.
Thanks, everybody.
bye everyone.